Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 830 for the 1st of September 2024. Richard Saunders here with you from sunny Sydney, Australia, on what is in Australia officially the first day of spring. And the weather certainly has been spring-like lately. Yes, we're springing into spring. The birds are singing outside the window as normal. Coming up on this week's show, you can count on Adrienne. You can count on Adrienne all over the world. Adrienne Hill has been travelling on the high seas and throughout very interesting parts, including Iceland. And during her adventures, she encountered our old friend from the European Skeptics podcast, Andras Pinter. Always good to catch up with Andras Pinter from that fine podcast. And then she meets up with science communicator Coleman. Now, he's a former conspiracy theorist turned science communicator, and there's a link in this week's show notes to his YouTube channel. Adventure Bound with Adrienne Hill coming up at the top of the show. Then, straight away, without taking a rest, Adrienne is back to present this week's newsletter from the Australian Skeptics, written by Tim Mendham. And indeed, I think there's more information in there about the upcoming Skepticon convention in Sydney. And just to remind you, if you go to skepticzone.tv, look down the right-hand side of the page, you'll find a picture of Michelle Bickersma, of course, and a link there to Logical Fallacies, a series that Michelle did a few years back. But just under that picture, there's a link and a QR code for Skepticon, the Australian Skeptics National Convention, which will be on the 23rd and the 24th of November. That site is live. You can book your tickets. You can see who's going to be speaking. We'll talk more about that soon. But to round off the show in the Trove segment, we look at the psychic prognostications, the predictions, the visions, the apparitions seen by one Andreas Zee way back in 1975, where he had a run of stories in a popular magazine, the Australian Women's Weekly. And his run of predictions happened to coincide with a dramatic time in Australian politics. Find out more in the Trove segment. Now, before we get into the show, a big announcement. We have a new reporter, well, scarcely a new reporter, Susan Gerbeck, my dear friend Susan Gerbeck from Guerrilla Skepticism on Wikipedia, who has been submitting reports to the Skeptic Zone for years. Well, it's official now. She's an official reporter, and you can find her bio on the reporter's page. I don't know if I want to say welcome to the show, Susan, because you've been a part of it now for so long, but it's great to have you on board. Well, now it's time for me to run downstairs and have some lemon tea. You might hear that I'm just on the last little bits of a cold I picked up somewhere across the Pacific, I think, on a flight. I don't know. I've been not too well lately. I've been in bed a lot and sipping tea and things like that, but I'm certainly feeling a lot better today. Anyway, while I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. You can count on Adrienne with Adrienne Hill.
Hello, everyone. This is Adrienne Hill, and I'm reporting to you from somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, off the coast of Canada, on the calmest seas I have ever experienced, and in a fog so thick that the captain pretended we were actually flying today because he couldn't see the ocean from the bridge, and he asked everyone to fasten their seatbelts in case of unexpected turbulence. Today I bring you 2 interviews from people I have run into on my travels outside of Skookum Studios within the past month. First, I discovered a bit of ESP. That's the European Skeptics podcast. And I met Andras Pinter in the beautiful Rocky Mountain town of Canmore. Next, in Reykjavik, Iceland, I just happened to run into Coleman Watts from the Think This Through YouTube channel. Coleman had attended Susan Gerbich's weekly trivia when I announced I wouldn't be there for a while since I was going to Iceland. He private messaged me, and it turns out that we were going to be on the same cruise. Well, sort of. He was traveling from the US to Iceland, getting off the ship, and we were boarding later that day to return to the US. But we managed to get some time together, had a nice dinner, and I squeezed in an interview. Well, I'm sitting here inside of my car, and my car's name is Sparky for a good reason. And the good reason is it's an electric vehicle. And with me, I discovered some ESP while on a trip to Canmore. And I have Andras Pinter from the European Skeptics podcast sitting here with me. Welcome.
Oh, thank you very much. And thanks for coming to see me in beautiful Canmore.
Yeah, it's lovely today, and you can almost see the mountains. There's not too much fire. Andras is here with a tour group, and they've actually had to do a little bit of a detour.
Yes, unfortunately, there was a wildfire at first very close to Jasper, which is a beautiful, lovely place, and then it actually hit Jasper. So we were supposed to spend then one night in the town, which will not happen for a while, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it's too bad. And instead, you're going to visit my old stomping grounds in Whistler, British Columbia, as an alternative, I believe.
Yeah, which is a place I've never been to, which is not necessarily a good starting point when you're taking a group there as a guide. But I'll try to do my best to get prepared by then, by the time we get there.
Oh, I'm sure you'll find lots of interesting things. So I have to ask you, you are not only involved in the podcast, but you have a group that you run back home in Hungary.
Yeah, that's correct. That is the Hungarian Skeptic Society that I'm an original member of. And since 2020, I've been the chair of the organization. That is about a 75-strong organization, and which we try to do our best to get the message out. But managing that, while I'm constantly on the road, is a bit of a challenge, but I love a bit of a challenge every now and then.
Yes.
Or every day.
Yeah, being a tour guide every day, I'm sure there's several challenges.
Yeah, there are some. But recently, I got to edit our own podcast, the European Skeptics podcast, the latest episode that you might want to listen to, episode 437, because Pontus was otherwise engaged. And I got to edit the show in very special places, like the CN Tower, also on the plane between Toronto and Calgary, but also at Niagara Falls. So while the group was out having fun, enjoying the view, I was sitting in a cafeteria editing the show.
Well, when I listened to it on my way back to Calgary is about an hour and 10 minutes away from Canmore. And so while I'm listening to the show on the way back, I will keep that in mind.
Great. That sounds good to me.
And I want to ask, so what's the craziest thing you've discovered recently?
Recently? Oh, I do have a very recent experience on my tour to share with everyone, because actually I ended up in a conversation with one of my group members who was a very nice lady. They were asking about how I managed to have a private life and what are the things that I do apart from this. And I mentioned skepticism. And then she asked me what I thought about homeopathy. A bit of a pause there. Yes. on my part, because obviously I didn't know what I was getting into. But then I thought I managed to find the right amount of a true skepticism alongside being a nice guy by saying that it's a very nice fairy tale. And, well, so I must have hit a nerve there, because she started to really try to explain to you, to convince you that it was a real thing. Yeah. So she went all snake old salesman on me. It was really weird, but it was a great exercise in listening, being skeptical while not being a dick about it. And because obviously me being her tour guide, I should not treat them as idiots. We ended up having a nice conversation about it, and I got to ask my questions, and it turned out that she is unwilling to change her mind, or would be anyway. She was kind enough to share with me that I'm actually, going the wrong way, and I should really change my way of thinking because I'll be lost very soon. Yeah. So that's my latest weird experience.
And if I remember correctly, she's a pharmacist.
She is indeed. And the husband works in pharmaceutical industry as a chemist. And he doesn't share her views, but he's very nice about it too. I wanted to learn from him how to deal with people and situations like that.
Yeah, so being respectful, but having a conversation. And you never know, 2 years from now, she might think back to this and go, he had something to say that was valid.
Oh yeah. The best part of this, I still haven't shared with you, and that is that she tried to convince me that homeopathy can be used for chronic illnesses and of course COVID-19 as well. She specifically mentioned cancer too, which really tested my ability to keep my cool. But then when she tried to convince me how much it can be used to and how successfully it can be used to treat chronic illnesses, I realized that she is the only person in the group who has lactose intolerance and who happens to be a celiac.
So celiac disease.
Yeah, that is pretty weird to have come from someone who's suffering from those two chronic conditions, and yet she does believe sincerely that every kind of chronic conditions or illnesses could be cured with it.
Pretty ironic.
It is ironic.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add?
Nothing. I just really appreciate you coming out to see me, and sitting in your amazing EV is like a cherry on top. Thank you very much for taking me on a ride in this car, which is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and I didn't crash into anything, so that was good. And this is our second year in a row that we have done this, and I hope that we will have many more years to come. So thanks so much for taking this time to speak to me in my relatively new microphone that Richard purchased for me.
Thank you, Richard. Oh, and by the way, thank you for the lovely message. We would have loved you to be here tonight as well. It would have been great. Yeah. Well, we should try and do that sometime.
That would be great to have Richard here as well, because Richard sent us a voice video that said, "I wish I was with you guys." And yeah, we would have loved to have Richard here as well. So we'll try and make it happen at some point. That would be wonderful.
That really would. And keep up the great work that you do.
Back at ya.
And see you next year. Or if not before, who knows?
That would be great. Thanks so much. Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill, not from Skookum Studios, from Sparky Studios.
That's amazing.
This is Adrienne Hill, usually from Skookum Studios in Calgary, Canada. But right now I'm in Iceland, and I bumped into a rather interesting person. I have with me Coleman Watts. Welcome, Coleman.
Hi, Adrienne. Fancy meeting you here.
And you don't live in Iceland, do you?
Nor do you. But we just happened to be here at the same time by sheer coincidence. Maybe it was fate. I don't know.
I think it must have been. We've never actually met before, but I am a recent admirer of your work. Can you explain exactly what you do on YouTube?
Sure. So I have a YouTube channel called Think This Through, where I do videos that are funny and entertaining and engaging about things that are of interest to skeptics. And I debunk a lot of pseudoscience, a lot of New Age or religious nonsense, and people doing crazy things, and just try to have a good time with it, try to be entertaining and funny and fun, and sort of bring people along as much as possible into the world of scientific skepticism.
Yeah, your videos are wonderful. And if you haven't seen them yet, you really should check them out. They're very funny and informative. The most recent ones you did were about one of my favorite topics, which is mathematics, because it involved Terrence Howard, correct?
Terrence Howard recently appeared on the Joe Rogan podcast twice, once for 3 hours and the next time for 4 hours. And for some reason, I decided to punish myself and watch all 7 hours of that so I could make these videos about that. And it was insaner than you can imagine. Just watch.
I agree. Check out those videos. Besides the Terrence Howard ones, can you generally be a bit more specific about some of your videos?
Sure. So I've done videos debunking New Age medicine, chakras, energy healing, faith healing. The chakras one was very interesting because I actually cited a few different sources who all claim to be authorities on chakras, which are energy centers of the body. And none of these authorities could agree on even how many chakras there are. Some of them said there were 7, some of them said there were 8 or 9 or 12 or I think 120 something. So I just let them fight it out and watched and had a good time with the video.
Did you say energy centers?
Energy centers of the body. So if your chakras are out of alignment, it can cause you to manifest physical diseases, which of course could be solved or at least charged for by recharging your chakras by paying a practitioner to do something, wave their hands over you or use a crystal or a dowsing rod or some, I don't know, magic smoke, whatever it is that they do. And that could help your swirling energy vortex in your brain and your heart and your anus and wherever it is in your body to realign and flow correctly.
Oh, wonderful. And Coleman, you have just got off a cruise ship. In fact, the same cruise ship my husband and I are going to be getting on. And you told me something rather interesting that you found on the cruise ship that they are offering.
Right. So I went up to the spa to try to win a free massage for my wife because she likes that. And while I was there, I got the pitch because, of course, in order to enter the raffle, you have to get the pitch. And I listened to a man who called himself Dr. Chi talk about the energy work that he does for his patients at the spa, including energy realignment and using sacred crystals and ancient Chinese medicine, acupuncture, and so forth. All of this very scientific, I'm sure. I don't know. I'm not an expert, but he is. Anyway, they are now also pushing IV therapy, which I'm very skeptical of. And as a skeptic, maybe you'd like to look into it because I don't know much about it, but I don't like needles very much. And I've heard that you can take vitamins orally. That's an option.
Or you can just eat good food that has those vitamins in it.
Sure.
Well, Coleman, thanks for joining me here in this beautiful city of Reykjavik. And let the listeners know how they can find you.
So you can find me on YouTube. My channel is called Think This Through, not to be confused with another channel called Think It Through, which I almost called my show, and then my wife pointed out to me that that would have a rather strange acronym. Think about it. So I have the channel Think This Through, 3 T's, not T-I-T, and you can check out my videos. I do crazy, zany stuff. I wear costumes. Sometimes I write poems. Sometimes I reenact skits involving celebrities getting hit by geese on roller coasters. You never know what you'll see on my channel. I never know what I'll see when I research this stuff. Some of it's crazier than I thought it would be when I first get into it. So it's all a good time, and hope to see you there.
Thanks so much. And do check out his channel. It is a blast. As you can tell from the interview, he's a lot of fun. Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill, signing off from Iceland. That's a wrap. Well, that's all for today, and I hope you enjoyed the interviews. Links to the ESP podcast and the Think This Through YouTube channel will be in the show notes. And Coleman's discovery of the cruise ship offering of IV therapy. Yeah, they have an IV drip hanging at the entrance of the spa as an advertisement. Ew. And this has inspired me to cover this and other ship pseudoscience in a future Kate and Allie episode. Watch out for it. Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill.
Hello, Skeptic Zone fans. This is Rob Palmer. I write for Skeptical Inquirer as the well-known skeptic, but you may know me from zone segments I contribute where I interview the guests and speakers at SciCon, the annual conference run by the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. Well, this year's SciCon is just 2 months away. It'll be held from October 24th to the 27th in Las Vegas, and I'm recording this promo to encourage you to consider to attend. This year, I will be running the Sunday morning paper session with someone the Zone listeners know very well, Susan Gerbic. And someone else Zone listeners know very well will also be there, none other than Richard Saunders. In fact, Richard is doing one of the Thursday workshops, where, among other things, he'll be teaching the tricks of water divining, spoon bending, and the power balance band. Some of the other speakers you may know are Brian Cox from the UK, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Michael Mann, all 5 Skeptics Guide rogues who will be recording a live episode of their podcast, and mentalist Banachek, who will be doing a workshop as well as a free stage show. You can find all the details and registration information for the conference at csiconference.org. And if you need a little bit more to whet your appetite, you can watch my video interviews with many of the speakers. Those are available in my Skeptical Inquirer column at tinyurl.com/Palmer SI column. By the way, 2025 will be an off year for SciCon, so keep that in mind when considering travel plans. Bye for now. I hope to see you in Vegas.
Hello, everyone. This is Adrienne Hill, and I'm going to attempt to read the Australian Skeptics newsletter from the comforts of my cabin on the cruise ship. And it's been a bit noisy with the air conditioning and just general ship noises and people walking up and down the hallway, so hopefully it won't be too bad. This is newsletter number 204. And remember, you can subscribe to this newsletter and receive it every other week in your inbox. The full newsletter includes more stories and links to all the stories mentioned. But now, let's see what Tim Mendham has for us this time. Hi all, says Tim. We're excited with the launch of the website for this year's Skepticon. This is the 40th consecutive Australian Skeptics National Convention, and we don't know of any other skeptical group, certainly not among English language groups, that has achieved this continuous run of such events. That's why we're nicknaming it Skepticon 40 or XL. When I first read this, I was thinking extra large. Oops. This is the first in-person Skepticon in Sydney since 2018. And it is being held November 23rd through 24th at the Guthrie Theatre at the University of Technology, Sydney, which is the same location it was held at 20 years ago, which would have been Skepticon XX if we thought of such things at the time. That time, the convention was called, quote, Beyond a Joke, end quote, and featured comedians. This year, the line includes legends in scientific communication, including Dr. Carr and ABC Radio's Robin Williams, not to mention international skeptical star Ben Radford, and many more. In the meantime, our American listeners might look forward to National Ghost Hunting Day, which will be on September 28th, and which the organizers modestly reckon will be, quote, the world's largest ghost hunt, end quote. They've actually trademarked that phrase, which we didn't know you could. But hey, who's going to argue with a ghost hunter? And if you're not that keen to go ghost hunting, September 28th is both Urban National Wildlife Refuge Day and National Hunting and Fishing Day, which seems to be a strange synchronicity. National Family Health and Fitness Day, no doubt from all that hunting, fishing, and refuging. National Strawberry Cream Pie Day, Seriously? And of course, National Drink Beer Day. Strawberry cream pie and beer? A consummation devoutly to be wished. Enough already. Read on, Tim. Okay, Tim, I'll do just that. Skepticon tickets now on sale. Tickets are now available for both in-person and online attendance at Skepticon 2024, with full 2-day and 1-day options for the in-person format, and lower price tickets for students, pensioners, and social welfare recipients. Skepticon 2024, Sydney, November 23rd through the 24th. Head to www.skepticon.org.au to find out more and grab your tickets. Band promoter of cancer cures hijacked by Gen AI. Australian Barbara O'Neill's natural self-healing remedies found a certain audience through her own efforts, leading to her being banned from any medical practice in Australia. But her image has now run wild thanks to unaffiliated groups exploiting her name on social media. ATO warning over sovereign citizens' tax advice. The Australian Taxation Office says Australia's controversial sovereign citizen movement has used tax time to spread misinformation about taxes, including the claim, quote, lodging is voluntary, end quote. The ABC reports that the ATO is investigating complaints about one woman from Queensland who claims she is a spiritual accountant and is allegedly advising people on how to avoid taxes. Not a good idea. TV and radio channels promote unproven autism therapies. MediaWatch has taken a shot at supposed treatment for autism involving orange-colored laser therapy, despite there being no evidence to support it. Needless to say, all 3 media outlets have been nominated for the prestigious Skeptics Bent Spoon Award. Bent Spoon nominations open. And speaking of bent spoons, nominations are open for this year's awards. Suggest your preferred purveyor of preposterous, paranormal, or pseudoscientific piffle, or as Tim would say it, pseudoscientific piffle. The award will be presented, along with more positive recommendations, during the gala dinner at this year's convention. Head to www.skeptics.com.au to find out more. Living in a simulated universe. In a simulated reality, anything could be possible, including the paranormal, and might explain why quantum mechanics is so weird. Quote, what we perceive as paranormal phenomena might actually be the result of glitches or inconsistencies within the system, end quote. How to make yourself lucky. Noted skeptic Richard Wiseman has discussed how lucky people generate their own good fortune via 4 basic principles: creating and noticing chance opportunities, making lucky decisions by listening to their intuition, creating self-fulfilling prophecies via positive expectations, and adopting a resilient attitude that transforms bad luck into good. Nothing paranormal then? I'm guessing not. And if you haven't read his book, The Luck Factor, I suggest you check it out. It is an excellent read. Items of interest. The unofficial UFO capital of the world. You will have to travel to San Clemente in Chile to see unidentified craft in the sky, woodlands, and water, and endure, quote, unsettling encounters, end quote.
Since 1995, hundreds of cases have come from the area, at an estimated average of 1 report per week. It was happening so often that in 2008, the government set up a UFO trail that maps out where the main hotspots are. This trail is 30 kilometers long and takes you through the Andean Mountains and forest range, including Coleman Lake, which is believed to attract so many UFOs because of its high mineral quality. And I apologize if I mispronounce those. I really do try to pronounce things correctly, but the internet here on board is so slow, it would take me 20 minutes to actually come up with something for each of them. So 40 minutes total. I hope my pronunciation was all right, and apologize if it was not. It's illegal to hunt Bigfoot in U.S. borough. The mayor of Derry in Pennsylvania has declared that it is now illegal to hunt for Bigfoot in the area. Some have cynically suggested the announcement is part of an ongoing attempt by elected officials to spur interest and tourism, but apparently not for Bigfoot hunters. Well, I guess you couldn't say Bigfoot is a hoser in this instance then, eh? Haunted doll has attacked 17 men. Oh my. Paranormal investigator Lee Steer, who acquired the doll named Elizabeth for £866, reports it exhibits violent behavior primarily towards men, potentially linked to past trauma or jealousy. The men or the doll? This unsettling doll is currently housed at the Haunted Objects Museum in Rotherham, South Yorkshire, hopefully behind glass. The Coulthard, Geller, and CIA show. Ross Coulthard, the winner of last year's Bent Spoon Award, and nominated again this year, presents a long interview with spoonbender Uri Geller, in which Geller explains how he used his special abilities to help the CIA. Coulthard reckons, quote, "It's still very much an open question whether or how Geller is psychic," end quote. You will need your own special abilities if you are to sit through more than an hour of this. Silliest story of the week. Crocodile fails in Northern Territory election. A crocodile named Speckles picked the winner of the recent Northern Territory elections. And guess what? It was wrong. Someone must have thought a crocodile trying to bite you was a good thing. Dear. Well, that's all for this week. And did you notice I used the word hoser? On our tour in Halifax yesterday, our guide explained where that term came from. And because the internet on the ship is so bad, in fact, it took 1 hour 30 minutes to upload a file for Richard that usually takes 1 to 2 minutes back home. So I could not look this up very easily. So I'm going to take his word for it. Feel free to correct me and the guide. So apparently, a hoser is a term that is part of Canadian slang that means a person, or cryptid, is a loser. This term was popularized many years back by a pair of fictional brothers named Bob and Doug Mackenzie. And according to our tour guide, the term originates back to the early to mid-1900s when pond ice hockey was a common pastime. Two teams would play each other, and the losing team had to stand out in the cold with a hose to smooth the ice surface after the game. So the losing team were hosers. Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill from the Atlantic Ocean somewhere.
Hejsan alla svenskar som lyssnar på The Skeptic Zone Podcast. Det här är Pontus Böckman från The ESP, The European Skeptics Podcast. När ni har lyssnat klart på alla inslag och intervjuer här på The Skeptic Zone så kanske ni har lust att kolla vad som händer på The ESP. Ni hittar oss på theesp.eu där man finner skeptiska nyheter och inslag ur ett europeiskt perspektiv. Vi ses där!
It's time once again to dive back into the archive of Trove at trove.nla.gov.au. Not only digitised newspapers, of course, but magazines. And one of the more interesting magazines digitised to a large degree at the Trove archives is a magazine called the Australian Women's Weekly. A very popular magazine for decades and decades and decades. And many decades have been digitised. Now, during its heyday, this was a very influential magazine, very high circulation, and I remember growing up, my mum would get this particular magazine every week, and I remember snipping out comic strips and articles and bits and pieces over the years. And it was while I was looking up various psychic predictions, I came across a series of predictions over several months in 1975, made by one Andreas Zee, Z-E-E. And he appears to have had a run of 6 weeks, or a bit slightly longer. It wasn't every week, from around mid-1975 to late 1975. And his first appearance in the magazine was on the 16th of July, 1975. And the page says, first in a monthly series, I Predict, by Andreas Zee. And a little bit of background it has about Andreas here. Apparitions began in boyhood. Andreas Zee is 28. His parents are Greek, and he was born in Sydney, where he now lives. He is a Scorpio. He has been acclaimed in Europe and America as a clairvoyant, and also for his work on psychic, and in quotation marks, sciences, such as the occult, astrology, and card reading. He is reported as one of the top interpreters of dreams. He has had many television and radio appearances in Australia. Videotaped shows are being shown overseas. Remember, this was 1975. A prolific writer, he has written books and numerous articles. He studied music at the London Trinity College of Music. Quote, I was 13 when I had my first apparition. End quote, he says, quote, I was persuaded to go into this professionally as a clairvoyant 18 months ago. For the year 1974, I had 97% accuracy in all my predictions, which was the highest in the world, end quote. Let's stop here and wonder how on earth he came to that conclusion, who did the marking, what was it compared against, where is it published? Of course, for a magazine in the 1970s just wanting a weekly article, a weekly column, why on earth would they care? We read on. His predictions included the death of President Pompidou, not sure who that was, Aristotle Onassis, and Susan Hayward, the attempted assassination of Sadat, and the overthrow of the military junta in Greece. On the Australian scene, his predictions included the Labor victory in the last elections by 5 seats and the dismissal of Mr. Snedden as leader of the opposition. Now we'll get to more about Australian politics soon, and you'll understand why. Z is not married. Quote, I like a naturopath existence. I am not a very great eater of meat, but I love caviar. End quote. He comes from a closely knit family and is very concerned for them. He travels constantly throughout Australia and overseas. Some of his national Australian television appearances have been on No Man's Land, The Mike Walsh Show, This Day Tonight, and Frost Over Australia. Shows popular, of course, 50 years ago. And indeed, a look around the internet comes up with Andreas Zee website, and I assume that's still a going concern. It says about Andreas Zee. Andreas Zee has been practicing psychic consultation for 60 years in Australia. Andreas had his first clairvoyance experience at 11 years of age. Andreas has been subject to printed and electronic media over 40 years. In the past years, Andreas has had his own columns in papers and magazines and has written many articles on psychic phenomena. His travels have taken him to over 80 countries. He has consulted politicians, entertainers, and royalty upon request. A white occultist, Andreas will not indulge in any satanic practices. Oh, that's good to know. Or seek to promote them. Andreas has travelled to well over 1,000 holy sites of many religions and is respected of all faiths that promote both charity and comfort. Goodness. The dice section, the dice section contains information regarding the history and use of dice. It includes 2 kinds of dice readings, thrice the dice and the roll a pair. The flowers sections contains information for divination for 69 species of flower, including images, Wikipedia links for reference, and quick links to navigate its alphabetical list. The candles section is a guide for coloured candles that may be lit to assist in obtaining goals or seeking positive result. And it goes on with other things there. So presumably, Andreas Zee is still a going concern. But let's get back to some of his predictions made in 1975. There are many of them. I won't exactly cherry pick, but I'll just go over a few over the months he was predicting in the pages of the Australian Women's Weekly. And to give you some context, on November the 11th, 1975, the Australian government was sacked from office. The Governor-General at the time decided to dismiss the entire government, and a new caretaker government was put in its place. This was one of the major political events of all Australian history. So somebody claiming to be, now what was it again, 97% accurate in their predictions, might have had an inkling this was going to happen. Nevertheless, let's review here and there some of the predictions of Andreas Zee in 1975. And the first few predictions come from the 16th of July. The following predictions are based on clairvoyant apparitions that appeared to me without effort or concentration. Each incident is explained to show how I interpret the apparition. For Australia, here we go. China will attack in winter of 1978. The reason for this prediction is based on the following apparitions. I saw, and saw is in quotation marks, Chinese planes dropping bombs along the Queensland coast with coral appearing in the sea. My second apparition was the Prime Minister not appearing as Mr. Whitlam, but as a younger man issuing a bulletin to the press that Australia was at war with China. My third apparition was a man sitting on a park bench reading a newspaper dated August 18th, 1978, with the headlines, Australian Fleet Prepared for Chinese Onslaught. Well, of course, China did not attack or invade Australia in 1978. However, the Prime Minister did change between this prediction and 1978. So, well, you know. Another prediction here, Australian golfer Bruce Crampton will win a major tournament within the next few years. I saw him hitting a final stroke on the 18th hole and people rushing to congratulate him. Now, this particular golfer, Bruce Crampton, won many tournaments in his career, but he did not win one in the time period that Andreas Zee is predicting. And here's an interesting one. A flag is flying half-mast above the White House in Washington during the next month or two. So that would be July, August, September of 1975. I've done some research. I can't see any instance, especially why the flag would be flying half-mast. I think occasionally it does fly at half-mast from time to time for various reasons, but nothing stood out. The apparition that appeared, he says, showed an American flag being lowered to the sound of the last post. People were crying in the streets and a coffin covered with an American flag was being carried along the roadway. Again, unless I'm mistaken, I can't find anything that would tie in with the mid to later part of 1975. Here's another one. For women in the news, Barbra Streisand will marry this year. I saw church bells ringing above her head. She was holding a wedding ring in the palm of her right hand and was smiling. According to Information Wiki, that didn't happen. Barbra Streisand did not marry until 1998. It seems to be. Now, as I said, this is just not exactly cherry-picking, but just looking over various predictions here and there. I suppose to do Andreas Zee justice, I would have to go through, like the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project, every prediction meticulously and mark it that way. But I think we can get a flavour of some of his predictions. Now let's see what he was predicting on the 13th of August 1975. He says here, South America will be the scene of a series of earthquakes during August and September. In this apparition, I see a group of men and 4 llamas. Well, I had a look, and there was an earthquake reported in Argentina in August of 1975, but there was no reports of damage or death. It was a particularly deep earthquake, and it was a 6.2, which is not a small earthquake, but not a very particularly large earthquake. Also, he says Nelson Rockefeller will contest the election for the US presidency next year. I see him hanging out pamphlets at a rally. Banners stating Rockefeller for president are being waved behind him. And my research seems to indicate that that was not happening. That did not come to pass. Another prediction here, a new government will come to power in Brazil before the end of the year. In this apparition, I see Brazil with a statue of Christ being subject to a general election. And again, my research indicates that that simply did not happen. Further down, we have here, Princess Anne will become pregnant before the end of the year. I see Queen Elizabeth smiling radiantly as she congratulates the princess on the announcement of the forthcoming birth. Prince Charles appears delighted at the fact he will soon become an uncle. The Duke of Edinburgh is also in the apparition, smiling and shaking hands with Mark Phillips. In 1975, that simply did not come to pass. However, Princess Anne did become a mother in 1977 and again in 1981. So I guess it was sort of on the cards. Now, as I said before, this is all leading up slowly to the dramatic events of November 1975 when the government was sacked. And if we look at Andreas Zee's column here on the 10th of September, he does mention the federal government. The federal government will restrict the issue of unemployment checks within the next 10 weeks. I see members of Parliament requesting that the Prime Minister set up an inquiry into the issuing of checks to the unemployed. I couldn't really nail that one down, but it seems to me this is rather a minor, trivial side issue to the what was to come. And if we read on for the world, he says, racial riots will intensify in the United States during October and November. I see coloured Americans clashing with white Americans in public streets with the initials USA deeply engraved on the pavement. There is blood flowing and bodies are lying all over the streets. Military personnel are rushing to break up the fighting, but to no avail. The apparition shows that these clashes between two groups are being repeated on numerous occasions. Well, a look through the history says there was apparently some civil unrest in Detroit in July 1975, which was before this prediction, but nothing particularly notable around the time that it should have been to make this prediction come true. So maybe just an unlucky guess. Reading on a little bit more, we find some celebrity news here. More celebrity news. Actress Mia Farrow will star in a new horror movie. I see her surrounded by people dressed as vampires, and she is smiling, commenting on the wonderful costumes that people are wearing. In front of her, there is a camera taking stills of her part in the movie for publicity. She is holding a large rubber spider in the palm of her left hand, as if this has something to do with the movie. She looks tired, as if the movie requires a great deal of effort, and she is not quite able to cope with its gruesome setting. Well, a review of actress Mia Farrow, and we discovered that her next role after this prediction was in Peter Pan, 1976. No sign of vampires. Now let's see what he's saying on October the 8th as we draw closer to the monumentous sacking of the Whitlam government. For Australia, political unrest. That sounds interesting. Political unrest within the Senate will lead to 2 further resignations within the government before the end of the year. I didn't quite see anything like that in my research, but it sort of is a bit null and void since the government was sacked. And on the following month in December, on the 13th of December, there was a double dissolution, which means the Senate and the House of Representatives were both up for election again. But it's possible he was simply commenting or extrapolating or thinking that something would be happening, because there was a bit of political unrest at the time leading up to the sacking of the government. In other news, Australia will defeat the West Indies in the forthcoming cricket test. Indeed, Australia did defeat the West Indies. So there you go. He got his cricket scores right. For the world, what's this? While visiting St Mary's Cathedral near Hyde Park in Sydney, I saw one of the most significant apparitions that I have yet to experience with such clarity. I saw the front door swing wide open to the sound of a flute. 4 young girls entered, each carrying a banner bearing the words, "For President." Above each banner, a face appeared. The faces were not at first clear, but eventually each became very definite. The first that appeared was the face of Governor George Wallace. The 2 that followed were of Ronald Reagan and Nelson Rockefeller. The last face was completely a mystery to me, so I went to the Mitchell Library, and after looking at more than 100 faces of political figures in the US, I eventually found it was a young man called Senator Tunney, Tunney. The apparition ended with an array of colourful banners and flags, as if this was part of a large convention that was being started. I feel that this was a sign to me indicating that these men were the candidates of the future for the position of US President, and that the contest was to be hard and long. Well, I guess we could give him a nod there for Ronald Reagan. If I remember correctly, I think Ronald Reagan tried to run for president once or twice before he got there. Anyway, now we turn to his next published prediction, which is on the page here at November the 12th. So this issue of the magazine came out one day after the events of November 11th, when the government was sacked. But of course, he would have written this, who knows, a week or 2 before for publication. But still, there will be a scandal concerning the West Australian Police Force in the next 2 months. Well, not exactly mentioning the biggest news of the day. The other news involving Australia, news involving the Roman Catholic Church and Cardinal Freeman will soon come to the attention of the general public. We have various other news concerning celebrities. For the rest of the world, he mentions concern around British Prime Minister Harold Wilson. Good news for actor Telly Savalas. But really, I think we can see that the major news has slipped past his psychic eye. And then we have his last column in the pages of the Australian Women's Weekly, which was dated here the 3rd of December. And again, not a word about the dramatic news, the change of government. We have here an attempted assassination of a leading political figure will occur before April. Not that I discovered. And in other news, the Queen Mother will experience a period of illness within the next 3 months. I see her on a very large bed, surrounded by doctors. They are not happy with the results of an examination, and one doctor is advising the Queen that he is extremely concerned. The Queen Mother is perfectly still, and there is a lack of movement in the apparition, which seems to suggest that the illness will not become known to the public immediately. The room has flowers all around, but most are limp. And I could not find anything in the history books about the Queen Mother that would match that prediction. So what are we to make of the predictions of Andreas Zee? Well, as I said, I'd have to go through each one meticulously like we did for the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project and give him a proper score. I don't think that's necessary in this situation. A lot of them, of course, are vague. A lot of them are about things he's seen or apparitions or mentioning celebrities at the time, a little bit of government thrown in. China invades Australia. That's not very good. But I think our conclusion would be it was simply an interesting column for what we'd call a woman's magazine at the time. Whether it came true or not simply was not important, although since it's such a limited run, maybe the startling lack of insight into the huge events of the sacking of the government gave the editors some pause for thought, or maybe his contract ran out. Who knows? In all the years since, Andreas Zee has simply not come to my attention. I think he was a flash in the pan in the 1970s. It's a very long time ago. But nevertheless, it is important to find these things and archive them for future reference, for research purposes. And you too can find all sorts of things and archive them, if you want to, at Trove, at trove.nla.gov.au, newspapers and magazines and much more, because when you go there, you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. As I mentioned at the top of the show, the Skepticon site, skepticon.org.au, is live. I'm just having a look there now. It's called Skepticon XL, or 40. Very clever. It's a supersized Skepticon, but it is the 40th annual Australian Skeptics National Convention on the 23rd to the 24th at the University of Technology here in Sydney. And we have a little bit of information here. This year, Australian Skeptics celebrate our 40th consecutive annual convention. And it will be in Sydney, and this will be the first one, actually, a face-to-face in Sydney since 2018 because of the pandemic. There will also be a convention dinner held on Saturday night, the 23rd. And this is normally where we announce the winner of the Bent Spoon Award. And I note on the Skeptics website, there's quite a lineup of interesting characters battling to win the Bent Spoon. And a quick look at the featured speakers here on the website. We have Dr. Carl Kruszelnicki, of course. We have Robin Williams, the ABC radio science communicator. Ben Radford, the cryptozoology and paranormal expert from the United States. Our MC is Alanta Colley, the wonderful comedian, science communicator from Melbourne, and I will even be making an appearance as well. Other speakers include Ian Bryce, Bill Chalker, UFOs Look Out, Paul Cropper, Jason Evans, Sue Yarachi, hello Sue, lots of other people. Look, it's all there. Check out the website for more information. And this week coming up at Skeptics in the Pub, Thursday night here in Sydney at the Occidental Hotel in Wynyard, we have a special presentation of the UFO movie They Don't Want You to See. Yes, the UFO movie They Don't Want You to See. There's a link in this week's show notes for the meetup group. Come along and heckle Brian Dunning from afar. Thank you to those people who support the Skeptic Zone with your weekly or monthly contributions at Patreon or PayPal. You can go to skepticzone.tv and find out more about that. It's because of those contributions that the show keeps on going. Here we are in episode 830. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders, nearly back to normal, signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.